Commander Foote, are you caller 1?
Hey guys.
I may be the first caller in. I just joined to listen in.
Hi, Kate.
Okay, we should be live and ready in the meeting room.
Thanks, Dwayne. I'll just wait for the mayor, and then I think we're ready to roll. I thought that technology worked really well at our last meeting. I was pretty surprised how smooth it went.
I think I'm the only one who had issues.
Well, Ross, we know you have issues sometimes. More issues than Reader's Digest, Ross. We did good.
I watched the YouTube channel. It went pretty good. So
Good. So this is also YouTube. I did just email you during our last meeting a quick agenda. So when the mayor starts here, we'll get rolling with that. Dave is going to take minutes for us as well. So there he is. Hi, Mayor.
Hello.
We're already live streaming, so I'll get started. This is it.
Just 1 second. I'm double checking that we are live streaming.
Okay.
Looks like we're good to go.
Okay. Thank you, Brad. This is the first meeting of the City Health Board. We had one previously scheduled in our agenda, but we moved it up just because of the situation. I'm going to introduce everybody and talk a little bit about the statutes that allow us to meet here in our frame of ordinances that allow us to meet. And then everybody, our second talk a little bit about the agenda. I'm going to have the mayor give us a little bit of an overview of our current community situation that we're in. And then we have a couple of things to talk about this evening. And our job is to make recommendations to the City Commission. The City Commission is holding a special meeting tomorrow. So they will very well likely act on what recommendations we make. So my name is Amy Leone. I'm the city manager. I have a voting seat on the City Health Board. There are 3 voting seats on that health board. The current city manager, who is myself, obviously. The current mayor, who is Nathan Johnson. So Nathan has a voting seat on that. The third individual on that board is appointed by the city manager, and I've appointed Dr. Mary Milroy as the third voting member. So I wanted to make sure we had a physician who could give us some specific knowledge that we may not have based on our training. We all have backup people to serve in our capacities if we should not be able to, either because we have another commitment, there's a lot going on right now, or if we should become ill. The backup for Mayor Johnson is Commissioner David Sarda. The backup for Dr. Mary Milroy is a nurse practitioner by the name of Katie Huff. And my backup individual, should I not be able to serve, is David Mingo from Community and Economic Development. I can also appoint ex officios who are non-voting members, but you'll hear them this evening visiting with us and helping guide our decision making. Those ex officios are Dave Mingo. He's Community and Economic Development Director, as well as Brad Bees, who is our Community Development Manager. And Brad has a role in a lot of the health and safety and welfare functions of the city that we're more used to, our typical zoning codes and those types, nuisance codes and those types of things. So he has some experience as well. Our city attorney, Ross Denherter, who will give us our legal advice and keep us out of, legal trouble there on our recommendations, as well as Commander Jason Foote. Important for us to have representation from law enforcement. They'll be helping us do our enforcement of any ordinances that are passed. So Commander Foote has been with us a long time. He's going to help us and guide us and make some good decisions there. So as I mentioned in our last meeting, but some folks maybe didn't watch that meeting, we already had this board in place. We just have not put it together and had a need for it. But if there was a need, now is certainly the time. So what we can do is make recommendations to the City Commission. We cannot pass laws. This health board cannot. We can make recommendations to them, and we can help guide them in making laws. So anything we say doesn't go into effect until it's adopted by the City Commission. So tonight we're going to talk about two things. One of those being closures of businesses, certain types of businesses, and recommendations about that, recommendations about alternative ways some of those businesses could still conduct their business, as well as the municipal election coming up. So we'll talk about those two things and make some recommendations, I hope, to the City Commission so they can make good decisions for our community. So with that said, I would like to have the mayor give us a little overview of the situation in our community and what's been going on. We're fortunate in this case because our mayor is also an employee of Avera, and he's on the leadership team there, so he has some additional knowledge, so it makes him even more appropriate here to sit on this board to help guide us. So Mayor Johnson, if you'll give the listeners and the health board sort of an overview and some of your opening remarks, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Amy. I should probably just mention that any comments I'm making tonight, I'm making as the mayor of Yankton, and they do not represent Avera, so I just want to make that clear. As we know, this is the time of a lot of uncertainty in our community, in the state, in the country, and so we are just doing our best to lead through this pandemic. So on Friday, I was on a call with other first-class city mayors with Governor Kristi Noem. And during that call, she told the mayors that it is our responsibility, meaning the local government's responsibility, to decide if we are going to mandate any closures of businesses. She does not have that authority. So with that kicked off a real series of events, calling this meeting to order and feeling some urgency to make a recommendation to the full City Commission if that's what the health board feels is in the interest of public health. Some other things that have been going on in the state: Huron and Beadle County officials closed restaurants, bars, and other businesses there as a result of some community spread that they've found. The Deadwood mayor has called for the voluntary temporary closure of the city's casinos, dining rooms, and bars. The Rapid City Council passed the first reading of an ordinance that would close bars, restaurants, and other recreation-type businesses. And the Sioux Falls mayor has said that he will recommend that their city health board close all non-essential businesses, so taking it even a step further than what we've seen in other communities. So far in Yankton County, there have been no confirmed COVID-19 cases. That being said, I don't think I'm alone in this opinion on the board in feeling that there really hasn't been enough testing for us to know the scope of the problem here or anywhere in the region, really. Both South Dakota and Nebraska have conducted limited testing. That will hopefully change in the coming days. I know private labs are starting to come online who will be able to increase the capacity of tests done. So hopefully that gives us a better picture of what's transpiring in our communities. Am I missing anything, Amy? I should also mention that we've had a county task force that's been meeting for several weeks now. And that consists of city and county officials, local health officials, members of our area towns. I've attended economic development leaders, so it's really a cross-section of the community, and we're having discussions about how do we make sure people who do get the virus have the housing they need, the care they need, those types of things. So I feel there's been really good cooperation on the local level to prepare for this. However, the health board's responsibility and the city commission's responsibility now comes to, do we follow suit with what has happened in many other states? So if I'm not mistaken, every single state around us has already closed bars, restaurants, and other recreation type businesses. That sometimes has included salons, massage parlors, those types of things where there's close contact. Nebraska has not done that on a statewide level. However, they have done it in, I believe, 4 counties around Omaha. So that is some of the background that's occurring here. Again, Amy, is there anything you think I'm missing?
I don't think there's anything you're missing. I think as we get into the recommendations, some of us will have additional things we'd like to say. I think, we haven't seen testing the way we may have liked to see it, not just in our state, but in our country. It seems to really be what part of the issue is. And so we're not going to be able to stop this, of course, no matter what recommendations we make. There isn't enough money or resources or even ability to do that. But what we want to do is do everything we can as a community in our power to help our medical professionals be able to handle what we know is coming down the pipe for them. So the recommendations that we've gotten, and I'm expecting we'll hear more from Dr. Milroy, but we've gotten from our physicians in Yankton, who I will say are as good as any in the world. Certainly, they're wonderful, and they're telling us we need to do everything we can to make sure our citizens are practicing good hygiene, practicing social distancing, not getting together in groups. And we've had an inability to make that happen. So we need to up our game a little bit, I think, in helping that become a reality. So those are parts of the discussion that's guiding our thoughts here and guiding us towards a step that we never really thought we might take.
Let me also add that the Dr. Byron Nielsen, the chair of the Yankton Medical Clinic Board, has reached out to me and said that the Yankton Medical Clinic would support this board taking more strict actions to limit gatherings in our community. And I described him what we were considering tonight, so they are kind of aware of the options on the table. The other thing I think we've seen and why we've felt we needed to call this meeting much quicker than we originally planned is because of the speed at which this virus spreads. We've seen New York, cases in New York really exponentially multiply and get to a situation where they can no longer really control, or their healthcare system can no longer handle the cases coming to them. And Seattle's experienced the same thing. There's absolutely no evidence that I'm aware of that just because you're in a rural state like South Dakota, you will somehow be exempt from the worst of this virus. So I think we need to take it just as seriously as everyone else. We are fortunate in that we've had some more time, we think, to figure out how we're going to deal with this. And so I think we need to use that extra time wisely, and thus being here tonight. Thank you.
So with that, Ross, do you want to talk about what would be our first recommendation? And that would be considerations on taking measures to change the requirements on some businesses and actually consider some closures of certain types of businesses. Also include in that, Ross, your time frame by which that could, how quickly that could happen. Unmute your mic, Ross. Your mic is muted.
Thank you. Sorry. All right. Yes, the first part of this is the initial closures designed to target logical places for social gathering. We've initially thought of 4 groups of these types of entities. And maybe a 5th. So I think if we're all on board with starting with an initial round of business closures, I think the first 4 and maybe 5 really are the places to start. So the first category is all restaurants, coffee houses, bars, breweries, dance clubs, gentlemen's clubs, cafes, and other similar places of public accommodation offering food and beverages for on-site consumption, including any alcohol licensees with on-sale privileges. Now that's, of course, tempered with the continuing ability to do carry-out, drive-through, the off-site delivery, the ability to serve food without gathering. Those alcohol licensees that would have off-sale license privileges could also continue. The next round would be, or the next category would be all recreational facilities, including pools, health and fitness facilities and clubs, social clubs, fraternal organizations, athletic and weight training facilities, movie and live production theaters, event centers, meeting halls, and music and entertainment venues. The third collection is all tobacco shops and lounges, vaping shops and lounges, hookah lounges, although Yankton doesn't have one, it sounds like they may soon, and other similar businesses which allow for on-site consumption of any product by smoking or inhaled vapor. Next category would be pool halls, video game arcades, video lottery, casino operations, bowling alleys, ice skating rinks, and other similar recreational or entertainment facilities. And then another classification, which some places have regulated, but I have not yet seen anywhere in South Dakota to have done it. But it's barbershops, hair salons, nail salons, spas, and massage parlors and things of that nature. Because of the close contact that is involved, we may want to add other types of business entities into that category, things like perhaps non-emergency chiropractic care, optometry, and dental offices, just because of the close contact. But that's a little bit further than what others have done up to this point, but I think perhaps makes sense in the current climate. And initially, the way that I have drafted the proposed ordinance would provide a reasonably short window as a place to start, making closures last until the Tuesday following the next regularly scheduled commission meeting, but allowing our commission to extend those closures as well as broaden the scope of the businesses affected just by passage of a simple resolution, as opposed to having to go all the way through the ordinance approval process, which takes 2 meetings separated by 5 days, and then a publication. So I think this is probably where we should start our conversation with this first initial step in limiting the spread of the COVID-19 by limiting social gathering locations.
So I would like just philosophically to say, so it's just part of the record and so that the viewing audience is watching this, I don't think this is a good position for the city to be in. I feel that this is something that should have come from the state of South Dakota, either from the governor herself or from the legislature and Pierre. And here's the thing, what's happened now is we've created a situation where we have a lot of larger communities that are close to the borders of our state. Yankton is one of them, but Sioux Falls is, Rapid City is, Aberdeen is not that far from Fargo. And so because we've dragged our feet for a reason I don't understand, we've had time for folks to come in now and utilize those facilities where their facilities have been closed. Also, if we're doing this city by city, county by county, we put ourselves in a position where Mr. Scherschlick said earlier in our work session, you know, we're going to have to push people out to the county to do the things that they're going to do. And then they're going to come back here. And if it's not consistent, it won't be as probably effective as it would be if it was consistent across the state. However, that's where we are today. And, you know, if we're going to do everything we can in our power to stop the spread, that's what we have to consider today. So, you know, be it as it may, we're looking at these measures. Now, from an enforcement perspective, I will look, you know, to our community development folks and our PD. However, this type of thing is difficult to enforce. And we're at a time where we have, you know, critical need for staff as well. So there's that as well. I'm going to make my decision based on what's medically best for the community and what's best for the community, you know, based on what our medical providers recommend. But I really am philosophically against this because I feel our role in city government is to run city government, not run the whole community. That's why we have trusted partners everywhere else. But I do want to get a lot of information tonight so to help me guide, because I think we're at a point where, you know, health is the priority. So that's what will help me with my decision.
I just want to add to Amy that I'm really concerned about the piecemeal nature that this local government by local government decision will create in the state, and it will not be as effective in flattening the curve, preventing the spread of COVID-19. And so I hope it does not have a really negative effect on the ultimate outcome of this pandemic. And I also, you know, I know none of us want to be in a situation where we're making the decision to take away the livelihoods of people we know and love in the community. None of us got in the business into public service to shut down businesses. We focus on the exact opposite, getting more businesses to open and grow. And so this is a really different place we've been put in due to a global pandemic. Ross, did you talk about the punishments that would be associated with violations of this ordinance?
I have not yet. The way it's drafted, a violation of any portion of this ordinance would be considered a Class 2 misdemeanor, which is the strongest level of penalty that a municipal ordinance can impose under state law. That's punishable by a fine of up to $500 and up to 30 days in jail. However, I did not elect to put a specific fine in, leaving that to the discretion of the court. which is typical. But we do have, as a municipality, the power to establish the fine. So if we wanted to make it extremely stiff, it would be within the powers of the city commission to say each violation shall be a $500 fine. And, you know, that of course carries a larger fear factor. I just don't know that we need to go to that level on this. Quite frankly, I think we're after compliance, not punishment. We really want people to cooperate. I think it's perhaps enough just to criminalize the conduct. But that is the worst case scenario. If you are a violator of this ordinance, knowingly and willfully, the court could certainly make you pay for it.
I think I would like to just make a couple of comments too, in that I don't think we have ever faced anything in our lifetimes quite like this, and that I appreciate the City Commission taking this very seriously and looking at these, you know, really rather drastic measures, but doing so in the interest of the health and safety of the community. So certainly with a, you know, a heavy heart, but a concerned heart for this community. I think the problem with this novel virus is that, you know, we all see flus. We all know some of the devastation that the flu can have. And recognizing that this is probably at least twice as contagious as what we consider of a seasonal flu. And so that we know that it spreads through communities extremely quickly. And when it does so, there are people who are much more vulnerable. And when they get sick, it happens often in a sharp curve unless action is taken. And that kind of an upswing that's very sharp can completely overwhelm a medical system. And I think one of the things that we are seeing in, you know, if we look and take examples from other countries, other states, who are now in absolute emergent situations, such as New York suddenly having 20,000 people at maybe last count, is probably more now, and actually hearing the mayor of New York say, if we don't get more ventilators, people will die. I mean, that's a situation. So this is not it's something that we can take lightly. I think right now, as everyone has said so far, there's been really kind of a lack of overall leadership. We've had kind of mixed messages from national government. We maybe have had not exactly some of the strong leadership from maybe the state that we would have appreciated. I know there are at least 12 states who have taken statewide action to shut down a lot of gatherings, recreational type gatherings of people. And so I think that the population in Yankton is looking for leadership. I think they're hungry for leadership. I have had a number of people reach out to me, text me, call me, that say, is somebody going to do something? You know, I think there's a tremendous amount of confusion. And really, it is with a heavy heart that any of us would consider shutting down a business that we know is the livelihood of our friends and neighbors. But I think that the health concern is real. It's there. And maybe I'm an optimist, but I have seen how many businesses have voluntarily shut their doors. Look around town. Look at the restaurants, the salons, the massage people who are not working already. They're doing that voluntarily out of a concern for themselves, for their clients, for the community. And I think that making it more widespread, although a difficult decision, is a necessary decision. Some of the things that we also look at are when the system gets overwhelmed, one of the first things to go are some of the personal protective equipment. That has been severely lacking. Some of the things we're not even talking about are the places where the nurses, the doctors, the EMTs the firemen, the police don't have protective equipment, and they're out there on the line. I know that in New Jersey, there are at least 35 physicians and nurses who are quite sick right now. So what happens if we start losing many of our first responders? We just need to contain this as best we can, and I think it's a serious problem that's going to take rather extreme measures. So that's kind of just my opinion.
Dr. Miller, I have a follow-up question for you. How do you feel about the carry-out business and things like that? If you're a restaurant owner and you're conducting a carry-out or a curb to pick-up type situation or delivery, do you feel like that is acceptable in terms of still limiting spread? That would give businesses a way to still operate at some level.
I think on every national recommendation that I've seen, that is still allowed. I think that those businesses are expected to maintain the kind of social distancing within the business, to use very careful hygiene, but that would be okay. And in fact, many communities are saying that's one way we can support those local businesses. We can get more takeout than we normally do. We can make sure that, they often help. When we come with our organizations and ask them for help, right now they're asking us for help. And I think that is one way that we all can support those businesses. And I've never seen any national recommendations suggesting that we shut that down. But certainly give guidance to the businesses to do this in the absolute safest way possible.
Along those lines, Dr. Milroy, I had a daycare owner reach out to me today and ask, is there a recommendation for daycares? I know in our draft ordinance, if we were to take it to if we were to look down the road to taking this to the next level and shutting down all non-essential businesses, we still consider daycares an essential business as we've defined it in the draft. But are you familiar with what the CDC is recommending for daycares?
I don't know if I've seen a specific recommendation from the CDC, but most of the guidance I've seen has been that can be considered an essential service, because so many of the people who are our first responders and on the line, they simply still need to have childcare. But certainly having the childcare workers do as much hand washing and careful sanitizing as possible, knowing, with a whole pack of small children, I know that's not an easy task. But I think that is, in any recommendation I have seen, that is still part of essential services.
I'm curious what our ex officios have to say, what their position is from both a health standpoint, enforcement standpoint, philosophical standpoint. They're on here because they all have a lot of expertise, and I have a lot of respect for them and their ideas and thoughts. So guys or gentlemen, would you weigh in?
So from a law enforcement standpoint, I've been here for quite a few years, and I've gotten to know a lot of the business owners around here. And I think Dr. Milroy is right that there is a lot that they have voluntarily closed their doors. But I think there's those that haven't yet, but have been waiting for that guidance from us to, hey, we need to shut down. So I think as we do this, if this is a recommendation that goes forward, we're going to see that compliance from most of those businesses. And I don't think we're going to have a lot of issues. And when we do, we're a small enough community that we know these people, we know these managers, that hopefully we can communicate that, hey, we need to shut down for health and safety reasons. And I don't foresee it being a big problem for our department, but we're ready to deal with it if it is. So
I'd say, I agree with Amy's initial comments about, local government really shouldn't be forced to be in this role. We have other essential services, the water's got to run, People have to be able to flush their toilets. We have to pick up garbage. Those are all the things, that we should be making decisions about. And it's awkward for us to be put in a position to even have this discussion at this level. But all that being said, the train's far enough down the tracks that I think the direction that we're going with this draft ordinance and the provisions that have been discussed are the prudent thing to be talking about and considering right now. I worry quite a bit about law enforcement and other, frontline staff. We don't have a huge police force. If we end up with a couple of them even in quarantine, that dramatically impacts their scheduling and how they function. So, I worry about that, and I'm hopeful, very, very hopeful that businesses will continue to step up and volunteer to comply, and also, the few people that we do end up needing to talk to, we can come up with protocol that is functional, where our enforcement personnel, whether it be law enforcement or whoever in the field, can have a discussion outside of group quarters, that's productive and ends up with the result that we're all hoping for.
Time like this to come up with a perfect solution. And as Dave said, we're used to, and we're most comfortable in dealing with predictable, easy to understand, and well thought out rules that folks have had an opportunity to spend time understanding and debating. And that's not the situation we're in right now. And so I guess I'll say I appreciate that the ordinance, as suggested, strikes a balance and does incorporate those elements that the federal authorities and state folks have suggested, so that it does incorporate the best of those suggestions while trying to strike a balance that makes the most sense from a practical enforcement standpoint.
So on that note, the striking a balance from an enforcement standpoint, from my conversations with Jason earlier in the day today, we debated the notion of including those personal contact type businesses, spas and barbershops and salons and nail salons and things of that nature. And he expressed his concerns for the difficulty in enforcing those specific types of business enterprises, which is why I have removed those from the draft that I'm working with. They can be added back in, but what does the group think about the necessity of shutting those specific classifications of businesses off in light of the enforcement issue? I think there's a manpower issue. I mean, some of those businesses are home-based, so it's going to be kind of hard to track that kind of thing in many cases. That's on this first set of regulations, that first classification. That's what I'm struggling with right now.
I'm going to probably add more questions than I will clarity on this, but to me too, that's a different animal, because when I go to restaurants in town, they're busy, which is awesome, but they're close. I mean, sometimes we even wait, which is not good when you're hungry, but if you need to wait, you need to wait. So, and we have some large venues, right? So we have some, places that can hold more than 200 people and eating at the same time. And, we have some large drinking establishments where people are, ingesting things. When you're getting a haircut at a barber, I'm looking at Jason and Dave, looks like they've been recently.
I do use a drive-through for my haircuts.
I'm not sure that you're eating and drinking when you're doing that. certainly you're talking, my understanding is this is something that is airborne and, you have to get droplets and yeah, you're touching, but I don't know. I don't know that I have enough information to know about that level yet. And also, there's probably not 50 people in that room or even 10. There's probably 2. So yeah, I don't know on that.
I agree that it's certainly a little more of a gray zone, but I think in our other meeting, I read a text that I had just received from a salon owner who was, I think, asking for guidance and leadership. And, I guess I also would like to hear what Jason says, but I would think that making that part of the recommendation still is good to leave it in, because I think sometimes some of those owners might want to close, but are maybe afraid of some of the pushback they might get from their clients. And if they say, this is safety, this is part of the city's recommendation, they're a little more protected, I think. Because then if you're just one person that is uncomfortable with that, it makes it a lot harder for you to say, hey, I want to do the safe thing. So anyway, I think also it has been known that the virus can last for really quite a while on surfaces, doors, door handles, such things like that too. So I guess my leaning is to leave it in, but I also would wonder maybe Jason's input on how he feels that, I don't think we have to try and ferret these people out, but just have that in place, sometimes for their reassurance, protection, and to give them some leadership.
So I feel like it's going to be difficult to enforce those, but also having the medical perspective of it, that now kind of makes me wonder maybe it should be in there. We hate being so stringent on these regulations for people, but also our goal is to keep this from spreading, and having them be that close and going in there and maybe having it and not knowing it, and then you keep spreading it on and on to the next person. So I guess having your perspective, Dr. Milroy, it kind of changes my thinking of it, and maybe not so much as the enforcement part of it, but having it in there for the guidance for the people that are looking for that leadership to make that decision is better that way.
So welcome.
Sorry, Amy.
Go ahead.
The one thing I'll say, and I know Brad and Jason and I live this life, and Ross gets to see it, months after, we may or may not have been successful. But the one thing that's we all got to be aware of, eyes open, is there will be people that don't comply. Some, we hope that they all do. And, business is one of those things where some people might try and take advantage of a situation of non-compliance to gain a long-term advantage over somebody who's trying to do the right thing. And I know this isn't the time to talk about fairness in that respect, and we just got to hope, I guess, if we move forward with this, that people will just do the right thing because it's the right thing to do.
So I don't know, Dr. Milroy, if anybody welcomed you to our team, but how we do things at the City of Yankton is we challenge each other so we can make the best decisions. So here it comes. Welcome to our team. So there's a lot of businesses that don't fall into that category where we're coming close to people. Chiropractors, physical fitness, physical therapists. We have dentists. We have a myriad of things where we're close together. So where do you fall on those types of businesses as well? Because certainly if you're doing chiropractics or you're doing dentistry, you're more invasive than you would be if you're getting your split ends trimmed.
Certainly, I guess I have to say, this is all pretty new to me too, so I'm not an expert on some of this too. Some of these are gray zones. But I would say that certain health type treatment done by a professional. So if you have a physical therapist, if you have, you're having your chiropractic treatments, I would think that would fall under the health care category. Those are not recreational. You don't go to physical therapy for recreation. I would say more elective things are different. So certainly something like emergency dentistry, of course, that is I would call that an essential service. But I think in many places, many elective things are being asked to be postponed. And so I would, it's kind of gray zones. But I would say, certainly emergency procedures. But if we're asking some of the masseuses to stop, that's, they're very close contact. It's certainly well within your 6 feet. I would say a lot of elective, particularly recreational type contact things should be put on hold. So I don't know, but it's gray. I don't know if I have all the answers.
I would lean where you're leaning, Dr. Milroy, and understanding there will be compliance issues, but I think it goes back to what Commander Foote said earlier about we have a lot of good citizens in this community. There will be peer pressure to comply. So hopefully that is not a large issue. I know other states have gone down this route, and let me just share some statistics that Dr. Francis Collins from the National Institute of Health shared, and this was published in the journal Science, and it's what they found in China. For every confirmed case of COVID-19, there are likely another 5 to 10 people with undetected infections. Although they are thought to be only about half as infectious as individuals with confirmed COVID-19, individuals with undetected infections were so prevalent in China that they apparently were the infection source for 86% of confirmed cases. So I think it goes back to we really need to limit social interaction on a personal, close personal level. And so that's why I would lean where you are heading, Dr. Milroy.
Gentlemen, what do you think?
Ross, I think you were talking, but your mic was off.
Dang it, sorry. So as the voting members of the board, I think we're kind of funneling this down now. And we have a pretty decent place to start. But in my understanding, we're getting to a consensus that we do include those close businesses and then maybe also include even those medical providers, but provide an exception for emergent type appointments. Amy, Nathan, Mary?
Yes, I would say yes. I think if our nationwide recommendation too is to try and avoid being within 6 feet. If you're in having your hair done or you're in, having a facial, maybe having just a routine dental cleaning, you are an extended period of time with very, very close contact. So I would leave that in.
Norfolk just closed school for the rest of the year. Sorry, just got a text.
I also am an optimist. I think people are concerned about this. I think there's a strong community spirit, and I think we're going to see better compliance. I think we're going to see good compliance. I do think we have a good community. I think that there will be peer pressure, and I think a lot of people are going to be fearful enough to really stay home. They don't want their families sick. So I would think that's going to be the majority of our vast majority. We'll have outliers, but the majority of our community will be compliant.
How do you feel, Amy?
I feel like I know what the right decision is, and it's a really hard one to make. I think our business owners are leaders. I think they, we keep talking about people looking for direction and leadership. They're risk takers. They own small businesses in rural towns. They use proper sanitation. I think we have good compliance. Our code people will tell you that, but your health is your first wealth. And I've talked to Dr. Milroy, I've talked to other doctors, and they're on board that, we should be complying with the recommendations. So, I'm there. It's just tough. I think from there, if there's a commitment from the community, then when we move past this wave, that we support our local people and we shop in Yankton and we, recommit and reinvest in them.
I would say absolutely yes. Those businesses are the backbone of the community, and this is going to be very hard. So it is truly with a heavy heart that I think any of us consider this at all. And I think most of us hoped we would never have been in this spot.
And I think what Amy and I will do to that end is we'll be talking with our federal officials and encouraging them to, in their relief packages, they need to take care of our small business owners. That's where a lot of this help is going to come from. We'll do it at the state level too, and there are conversations going on about what we can do at the local level too. So none of that is lost on us.
Okay, so I have, based on that guidance, I have amended the draft ordinance to include that language again, and I'm going to specifically add here medical providers that provide, how should I phrase that, Mary? I got to think of the right wording for this. Do you want me to call it out by individual practice or refer to non-emergency? Your microphone's off.
Oops. I would say, urgent services or emergent services. I mean, just not your routine. I don't know how legally to phrase that, but
what we're doing here is we're making an order saying certain businesses should discontinue operations. So I if I refer to emergent care, emergency situations, that's an exception to the rule. So I'm wondering, how would you recommend I refer to the type of healthcare related practices that are non-emergency related? Because I don't think I want to shut down the Yankton Medical Clinic, but dental clinics, physical therapists, optometrists.
Physical therapy often is, that's a real gray one too, because they are often providing not just an elective thing.
Right.
I guess that whole category you might call ancillary services, entities providing ancillary services of a maybe non-urgent nature.
So ancillary services.
Ancillary services of a non-urgent nature would be what I would include in that.
Haven't most of our dentist office already voluntarily closed, or at least limited what procedures they're doing to preserve PPE? I feel like I've been hearing that. Does anyone know?
That is what I have heard also, that pretty much, I think virtually all of them have stopped doing routine cleanings and a lot of their routine. But, abscesses, broken teeth, urgent services still need to happen.
So Ross, just to recap, this is going to cover restaurants, bars, lounges.
Yeah.
Sports facilities, gathering, where you can rent a facility for a party. I don't know what we call those, but also gyms, spas, all those types of things.
Yeah, I'll go through the list here in just a moment. All right, so I'm going to read what I've got here. The first group, again, it's all restaurants, coffee houses, bars, breweries, dance clubs, gentlemen's clubs, cafes, and other similar places of public accommodation offering food and beverage for on-site consumption, including any alcohol licensees with on-sale privileges. All recreational facilities, pools, health and fitness facilities and clubs, social clubs, fraternal organizations, athletic and weight training facilities, barber shops, hair salons, nail salons, spas, and massage parlors. Amy, you gave me a couple criteria that I was not familiar with. It's not a world I live in. Estheticians, is that what you said?
Estheticians, folks that do facials.
Yeah, how do you spell that? Estheticians. No, Google. Estheticians.
It's with an E.
E-S or A-E-S?
E-S.
Okay.
And we probably don't have to work out all the mechanics and details of because the commission, we're recommending an ordinance. The commission can play around with the language as much as they would like to, as you know.
Yep. Okay. So I'll go on. Estheticians, ancillary health care services of a non-urgent nature, i.e., non-emergency services provided by dentists, optometrists, chiropractors, etc. Movie and live production theaters, event centers, meeting halls, and music and entertainment venues. And then all tobacco shops and lounges, vaping shops and lounges, hookah lounges, and other similar businesses which allow for on-site consumption of any product by smoking or inhaled vapor. And then all pool halls, video game arcades, video lottery, casino operations, bowling alleys, ice skating rinks, and other similar recreational or entertainment facilities. And then we've also carved out exceptions where we are not closing, or this does not apply to places of public accommodation that offer food or beverages for off-site consumption, including grocery stores, markets, retail stores that offer food, convenience stores, pharmacies, drug stores, and food pantries, other than any portion of such business which would be subject to the requirements of the preceding paragraph. Room service in hotels, I think that would apply to the Kelly Inn. I think you can get room service there. Healthcare facilities, residential care facilities, congregate care facilities, and correctional facilities, generally. Crisis shelters, homeless shelters, churches, soup kitchens, or other similar institutions. Any emergency facility necessary for the response to the current public health emergency or any other community emergency or disaster. What do you guys think of that list of exceptions? Too broad? Does it kind of fit the scope? I didn't edit this one. This is the same list of exceptions that was employed by both the city of Huron and Rapid City.
I think it looks good. You know, certainly people that can't go out. So.
You okay with that, Amy?
Yes.
Okay. All right. That, I think, effectively takes care of the first set. I did put inside this ordinance in each of those groupings a clause that allows the city commission to broaden the scope of businesses. So if there is a group of businesses that we think we should have included and failed to, the city commission by resolution can do that on its own.
So the commission would consider this tomorrow, and you have an effective date of Thursday, the 26th, but the second reading wouldn't actually be until Monday, March 30th, so we would have to publish it effective the 31st.
That's correct, yeah. There's a bit of an overlap there. We're going to tell the public, thou shalt stop effective Thursday, but in reality, the tools of enforcement don't really begin until the 31st.
But we can't start enforcing until the 31st.
Right, but there's going to be, I think, an appropriate wind-up period for this. I think, or wind down is probably a better term to use while these businesses are going to try to shut down their operations.
So we have to, pardon me, we have to take a vote of us three, the three voting members. Before we do that, do the ex officios have anything to add?
I don't have anything additional to add. I think, the discussion has kind of come full circle back into detailed aspects or definitions associated with the types of businesses we're talking about. And I think the important thing to understand is that with one resolution, we can adjust this on the fly. Things are changing not only day by day, but hour by hour right now, not just in Yankton, but nationally across the world even. So I think that provision in the ordinance that allows quick action by resolution is something that's important to have in there.
Anything else from the ex officios? Okay, so I guess one of us needs to make a motion, and then
one of us will make the motion, I guess. But
well, before we make a motion, can I have a little more discussion? So, Ross, you've also drafted what may be a next step in this process, in that you've defined essential businesses, and you have it set up so if we chose to take that next step, that could be done by resolution by the commission.
That's correct. Yes. I think if you guys are all good with the first piece of this, the next two things we got to talk about is, are we ready to regulate the definition of, or establish the definition of what is an essential business? Because that would be the next major step in closing businesses, because I believe the definition which I used, taken from the state of New York, which was presented statewide by the governor by executive order, is extremely broad, and for purposes of Yankton's economy, maybe perhaps a little bit too broad. I just figured perhaps easier to remove items than it was to add them. And I think it would be helpful if this board is going to recommend giving the commission the authority to limit or close any non-essential business, that we take a look at that definition and whittle it down perhaps appropriately. So I'm not sure it's appropriate to move right into that right now yet. As I understand what our current posture is, the first piece of this, are you guys all in agreement? Because then we can move into limiting group sizes within the city to 25, 20, 15, 10, whatever. That's probably, I think.
And it's a national number.
Right.
I guess the way I saw this is giving the commission a recommendation on closure of businesses, and then a recommendation on, the definition of essential, and then a recommendation on the number of group size, and thereby they could determine what they wanted to do with their ordinance. But we can look at the whole thing in one lump too. That's fine.
Sure. Yeah, I thought it was almost a little easier for this discussion to compartmentalize it, but I think we're all on the same page about the first piece of it. If you guys want to move into the second. The second thing in line was the giving the commission the power to limit the size of public gatherings. This afternoon at about 2:00, the governor issued her executive order that specifically said all gatherings should be limited to less than 10 people. And we didn't have that until just now. I mean, it was generally a recommendation by the federal government, but now it's as close to real guidance as I think we're going to get from our governor. So I think it's probably appropriate for this board to consider just a straight recommendation that we limit gatherings to no more than 10 people and just implement it.
Yeah, I think that one we're all 100%
there. Okay. I put some definitions in there that I'm also interested in you guys taking a peek at. Those areas specifically accepted from the definition of a communal gathering. Be places where people are going to be within arm's length of one another, but not for really extended periods of time. That list includes public parks, sidewalks, and streets, parking lots and common areas of any hotel, office buildings or residential apartment buildings, grocery stores, shopping malls, manufacturing facilities, or other retail or business establishments where larger numbers of people may be present, but where it is unusual for people to be within arm's length of one another for extended periods, hospitals, mental health or substance abuse treatment facilities, and medical clinics and facilities. And then again, any other location established by resolution of the Yankton Board of City Commissioners. Is that too broad? Do we need to rein that back a little bit?
So Ross, am I looking at the most current version where you also list grocery stores, shopping malls, manufacturing facilities?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I
So
think that was good.
You're looking at the most recent one if it contains a Roman numeral 5.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Any other location established by resolution of the Yankton Board of City Commissioners.
Right.
Okay. So you guys are all in agreement on that one?
Yeah, where I want to be careful, Ross, and I guess the group is, I think we can trust, some of these businesses, by the nature of their business, like the ones we were previously talking about, masseuses, for example, by the nature of what they do, they contact, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to get so restrictive that we're not letting our manufacturers do what they do. I don't want to be that invasive. I think we can trust them that the CDC has guidelines for manufacturers and things like in businesses, to implement practices of distancing within their own facilities. So I want to be careful not to get too far down a rabbit hole where we're, getting involved in every every entity possible. So I'd err on a more open definition than a more restrictive one.
That makes sense. You want to add in manufacturing facilities so long as they make a reasonable effort to keep their employees apart from each other?
I believe your own draft does that.
Does it? Did I read that?
That's my understanding of it.
Oh, it is. It's in there. It's Roman numeral 3.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say, I think, yeah, that Roman numeral 3 says manufacturing. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Manufacturing, or, many businesses too. I just think we want to, as much as we can, not dig down too far into a definition.
Right.
Because people can do a lot changing the practices by which they operate.
Right. Yeah, but I did give us the flexibility for the commission to add other, if this starts to cause problems, people are saying, well, how am I supposed to do this thing that we all agree is appropriate, but your ordinance says I can't? Well, it's hard for us to think of all of those potential exceptions that make sense. So we could still make changes as we need to.
Well, I'd say let's give them I would recommend that they make changes with recommendations of the health board.
Yep.
So I don't know if that needs to be inserted in the language or not, but.
Okay. So any other location established by recommendation of the city health board.
With a recommendation or something like that.
Yeah. Established by recommendation of the City Health Board and approved resolution of the Yankton Board of City Commissioners. Okay. Good call, Amy. Okay. Ready to move on to the next one? This is the sticky one. This is the next level of shutting things down, which is essentially closing all businesses that are non-essential. I don't know exactly how narrow you guys want to define essential business. I think that using the laundry list that the state of New York supplied, I think the idea was they looked statewide and decided if what things, if you close them down, would cripple the economy of the whole state. And I think the city of Yankton, being as small as it is, would perhaps have more authority to close down things without crippling the economy of an entire state, and the city would probably be able to survive it just fine, and have a little narrower scope of what's accepted from the regulation. So ideally saying that we would apply the restriction to more businesses.
Ross, I wonder, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security has a document that identifies essential critical infrastructure workers during the COVID-19 response. I wonder if we should just take a look at that, and maybe that's our list.
I was looking at the same list. It's 11 pages long.
Hey, Ross, I want to clarify that you said the limiting of 10 doesn't apply to services, essential services. No. So
regulation.
Yeah, I think there's we're creating some confusion because we're talking in one big about a document that no one else has in front of them except us.
Well, that's true because there's people who may be listening that are interested in the public that don't have a copy of this in front of them.
There's some confusion. So I just want to be clear that we're not talking about limiting the gatherings to 10. If you're conducting business as an essential service, what we're recommending is that kind of, if you can think of it in some different steps, we recommend that certain businesses change the way they're doing their business or that they close. We're going to recommend to the city commission that people don't congregate socially in groups larger than 10. So they get together in groups 10 or less. That does not include the essential services. And then we're recommending that the commission has the ability to add some different types of businesses to the list as essential or non-essential, thereby closing those if they should feel as this is the situation heightened. So those aren't all a blanket thing that's all together. So I really, think that once we make our recommendations to the commission and they're looking at your language, we need to get the language out to the public so they can see what it is all we're talking about. Because I can understand where this is going to be. It already is. I'm getting the text coming in very confusing to people.
Yep. Yeah, that's good advice, Amy. I think we should run with that. As soon as I have an updated draft for everybody to review, I will shoot it over to you, Amy, to disseminate however you think best. I don't know what is the most prudent way to get that into the hands of the public.
What we'll do, Ross, is we'll put it in the city commission packet. We'll post it then on the website tomorrow morning. And the commission will have an opportunity to see it and act on it, but it can still make changes to it on its second reading. So there'll still be some time there, and they'll have an opportunity for public feedback. So, I think it's difficult for us to craft the details of the language here, but I think we're generally saying what we're recommending for which way we're recommending the commission to go.
Right.
Yep. So another question, is the health board going to say, we recommend the initial portion that we talked about, the recreational activities, bars, restaurants, those types of things tomorrow? Then do we say there's something that kicks in when we see community spread, when we see evidence of clear community spread? Do we then recommend that the commission take the additional action? Maybe that's something we need to talk about as well.
Mayor, what I'd like to do is establish another meeting of the health board and meet regularly for a while, because I feel like things are changing so quickly. Perhaps once the commission meets tomorrow, we can keep our Wednesday meeting that we had previously scheduled and meet regularly so that we can continue to make recommendations to them. I hate to do that, to set levels, because what if we don't have if we set it as once we have Yankton community spread in Yankton County, and then we find that we don't have that spread yet, but they're spread in all the counties surrounding us. Wouldn't we want that in place? I don't want to put in triggers, and then when we might want to move quicker, or we might choose to move more slowly.
I like the idea of staying in contact, because I think things are changing so fast that it's hard to envision the contingencies. And so maybe just staying as up on it as we can and in contact, and kind of be willing to be flexible and go with the situations as they arise is going to be maybe the best way.
So for the sake of keeping things as flexible as possible, we can just keep the list we have now, but leave us the ability as a health board to convene, make recommendations to adjust the list of what constitutes an essential service, and have the commission pass a resolution accordingly. And this board will continue to meet.
And actually, the list you have that you took from New York is really pretty inclusive. Essential healthcare, infrastructure, manufacturing, retail, news, finances. I mean, they were, that's a pretty inclusive list. And then,
Here's
maybe if it needs tweaking later.
Okay, so this was vetted through a number of individuals today, and someone gave me the feedback. All right, I'm having trouble figuring out what type of businesses would be considered an essential. What type of businesses would be a non-essential business that aren't already closed by the first action that we're recommending? Because that list of essential services is so broad, aren't we effectively doing?
Yeah, well, we don't know that, Ross, because we don't know what. We don't know how things are going to play out.
Right.
I mean,
and that's,
you know,
it's just food for thought, because the second part of this may be irrelevant if the first is strong enough.
Right. And you know, I mean, I'm hearing about all kinds of different innovation in, you know, manufacturing across our country to help with this effort. And I wouldn't be surprised if we have some innovators out there. I know we have some on our staff, so I'm guessing there's a lot out in the private sector that might innovate and become, maybe they seem non-essential right now, but they have an innovation that they can really help either locally or maybe even nationally. So I just hate to.
Okay.
So in that question, then, do we need that next part at all? Do you just close the ones you do, and if you're not on the list, you're okay?
And you give the commission the power to adjust that list, which we've done in the draft.
Right.
So
that might just be simple wisdom, Dr. Bilroy.
Yeah.
The power to adjust.
One lawyer.
Because we're not gonna think of certain businesses that might need to be closed or might need to be stay open, and maybe we close them now, but they come up with the reason of why they need to be open. So having that adjustment period is a huge deal.
Right. Okay. Well, I kind of like the way that fits. Are you guys the three voting members? Are you guys okay with me just killing that third section of the ordinance then?
Yes.
Yes, I'm okay with that. And we do need to, you know, we do have to vote to make recommendations. So before we move on to the hopefully short topic of election, I want to make sure we package this up in something where we're actually complying with our ordinance to vote, because if we don't do that, then maybe our work wasn't, you know, according to our ordinance.
I agree with that.
You need a motion then to accept it, like the part 1, 2, drop the third as a package?
I'll walk you guys through what I have, and then you can vote on that.
Okay.
Does everybody have access to email at this very moment?
But
Yes.
Ross, people that are watching don't, so you have to describe.
For purposes of you guys voting on it, I'd kind of like you to have it in front of you, and I will summarize it.
Sure, I just want to make sure, you know, we're being respectful of our audience.
Right. I'm adjusting something on here real quick. What I'm trying to do at the moment here is adjust the language regarding the limitation of gatherings to 10 people. And I'd like that to match the language that came in the governor's.
Ross, do you want a little bit of time? We can talk a little bit about election while you're working on language.
That's a good idea. Go ahead.
Okay. So for everyone's benefit, our city election is scheduled for April the 13th, which is, April the 14th, which is a Tuesday. Absentee voting starts March 30th. We've been told by the state that the governor may address local elections on veto day, which is March 30th. That's too late for us because then we've already started. Ross has found something in statute that allows us on even number of years. So like 2020, an even number of year, we can combine our election with the June primaries. That would push things back a little bit for us. I don't expect the state to make any different decision. Maybe they will, but I just assume move through this process on our own and let them tell us we can't, as opposed to trying to do an April election. Problems with the April election I see is that our candidates can't campaign fairly. We are telling people to stay away from each other, but then telling people to come together and vote. I don't think that's appropriate. I don't think people right now are sorry, city commissioners listening, are thinking the primary concern is the city election, commission election. I think, they're thinking about their families and their jobs and their health. So I just don't feel people are in a place for that. So I'd like to recommend to the city commission that we move forward with an action to push that election back to the June primaries, which I believe is June the 9th.
I agree with that. It's just completely hypocritical of us to stand up here and say, don't go out, stay away from each other, but come together for this election. And then a lot of our poll workers are in the vulnerable population when it comes to COVID-19 infection. So I think this is the right move for public health.
Completely agree.
So with that, we probably won't be ready tomorrow we can give that recommendation to the commission tomorrow. We won't have any kind of ordinance ready tomorrow, but what I'll do is I'll work with Ross to work on that process. That'll be, something we'll probably, when we have our second reading on this ordinance, will be something we can bring forward. We have a little more time there. We'll probably have to still do some special meetings, but we have a little more time than we do with this one.
Yeah, we may be in a position to have the meeting that we were planning to have next Monday could be a first reading for that one. Don't you think, Amy? Yeah.
Yeah, well, why not? We've done a lot of things in a short amount of time, so. Are you ready to talk to us, Ross, now?
Yeah, I'm still gonna have to massage this.
I hate to ask this, but for the purposes of actually having a motion, a second, and a vote on record for the minutes.
I'll make the motion to recommend to the Yankton City Commission that we move forward with an ordinance to move the previously scheduled April 14th, 2020 city election to the June, to coincide with the June primaries, the June 9th, 2020 primaries.
I'll second.
Am I on speakerphone? This is Al at the Tech Center.
Yes.
Okay, you mentioned that to go forth with the meeting with the commission next Monday. That's the first day of absentee voting. A week from today is the first day of absentee voting.
I'd like to amend my motion. I'd like to amend my motion to make a recommendation to the City Commission that we postpone our previously scheduled April 14th City Commission election to the June 9th primaries, and recommend a special City Commission meeting prior to next Monday, that a special City Commission meeting be called so that we can get some, get a first reading and get moving forward with that as soon as possible.
So again, is that
One of us.
we have a first and a second. This would be an ordinance.
Again, let me interrupt one more time again. Ross, as you read the two codes that we talked about that allow the promotion of health and suppression of diseases, that's kind of where we're going with this, both the state law and the city law. I don't think there's anything in there that says this has to be an ordinance.
I don't know that. I don't believe it has to be an ordinance unless, and give me just a moment here to look. we may have established when our election takes place by ordinance. So give me just a moment to take a peek at that.
And at that point, do we have the ability to take some sort of emergency action to rectify the situation before Monday?
I think we can take a similar approach that we're doing right now, saying this is effective immediately and then just ratify it with a second reading later. That's how Huron and Rapid City passed their ordinances for dealing with the COVID-19 stuff. I'm okay doing that here too. We got to do what we got to do in the time frame that we have to do it. It doesn't look that I can tell like we have established our election timeframes by ordinance, so we should be okay.
So we can just do a resolution, Ross?
I think we could, yeah. We have a little bit of homework to do by statute before we can do an election that's combined with the county for the primary. We need to have the consent of the county. So I think the first step will be to iron that out. There's cost sharing there, so I imagine they'll be quite willing to let us share that operation with them. But that is a requirement before we can move it.
Well, I think they have a meeting tomorrow. I think.
Do we want to send an emissary there to smooth that out for us?
Yeah, but we'll make that recommendation to our elected folks at noon, and then we'll ask the county if our elected folks, you know, if they're okay with that, which I think they will be, then we can go forward with that.
Yeah. That's an easy.
Okay. So we still need a vote on that. So,
yes, all in favor, please. Yeah, roll call or however you want to do it.
Well, okay. I'm going to vote for my own motion and say Leon, aye.
Johnson, aye.
Milroy, aye.
So we have that recommendation down for the commission, and let's go back now to our recommendations on businesses, public gatherings, and closures.
I'll make a motion as it was stated.
Ross, are you recapping something for us, or what are you?
Yes, okay. I just finished rewriting that section 6 that limits the size of communal gatherings. Okay, so the first piece of the recommended ordinance requires closure of all restaurants, coffee houses, bars, breweries, dance clubs, gentlemen's clubs, cafes, and other similar places of public accommodation offering food and beverages for on-site consumption, including alcohol licensees with on-sale privileges. It allows for specifically an exception for takeout, delivery, curbside service, and drive-through service. The second group of businesses that are closed include recreational facilities, pools, health and fitness facilities and clubs, social clubs, fraternal organizations, athletic and weight training facilities, barbershops, hair salons, nail salons, spas and massage parlors, estheticians, ancillary healthcare services of a non-urgent nature, i.e. non-emergency services provided by dentists, optometrists, chiropractors, etc. Movie and live production theaters, event centers, meeting halls, and music and entertainment venues. The third group is tobacco shops and lounges, vaping shops and lounges, hookah lounges, and other similar businesses which allow for on-site consumption of any product by smoking or inhaled vapor. Fourth group is pool halls, video game arcades, video lottery casino operations, bowling alleys, ice skating rinks, and other similar recreational or entertainment facilities. All four of those groups, the closure is effective this coming Thursday, March 26 at midnight, and will remain in effect through Tuesday, April 14, unless that closure period is extended by resolution of the Yankton Board of City Commissioners. Exceptions include places of public accommodation that offer food and beverages for off-site consumption, including grocery stores, markets, retail stores that offer food, convenience stores, pharmacies, drugstores, and food pantries, other than any portion of such businesses which would be subject to the restrictions upon restaurants, room service in hotels, healthcare facilities, residential care facilities, congregate care facilities, and correctional facilities, crisis shelters, homeless shelters, churches, soup kitchens, and other similar institutions, any emergency facility necessary for the response to the current public health emergency or any other community emergency disaster, and any other type of service established by resolution of the Yankton Board of City Commissioners. That's the first piece that you guys would be recommending to the City Commission. The second piece is effective midnight on Thursday, March 26. It's deemed unlawful in the City of Yankton for any person to participate in a communal gathering, which is defined as an indoor or outdoor gathering of people, subject to the exceptions and clarifications I'll go through in a minute, which bring together or is likely to bring together more than 10 persons at the same time in a single room or other single confined or enclosed space, including but not limited to an office space or similar confined place of employment, a single family residence, or a residential apartment unit. For purposes of communal gatherings, we accept out the following places: public parks, sidewalks, and streets, parking lots and common areas of any hotel, office building, or residential apartment building, grocery stores, shopping malls, manufacturing facilities, or other retail or business establishments where large numbers of people may be present, but where it is unusual for people to be within arm's length of one another for extended periods, hospitals, mental health or substance abuse treatment facilities, and medical clinics and facilities. And again, any other location established by recommendation of the City Health Board and approved by resolution of the Yankton Board of City Commissioners. And that would also remain in effect through Tuesday, April 14th, or until extended time is, or until the extended time is maybe recommended by the Board of Health and approved by resolution of the Yankton Board of City Commissioners. So that is the The recommendation, the penalty for a violation of this ordinance would be a Class 2 misdemeanor, which is enforceable by a fine of up to $500 and a stint in the county jail of up to 30 days as determined by the judge. This ordinance would lose its effectiveness, or it would terminate of its own accord effective Tuesday, June 8th, which is the first regularly scheduled commission meeting in June. If the ordinance, if the powers that are discussed therein need to be extended beyond that date, the commission would have to approve another ordinance by that date. That's the entirety of the ordinance for you guys to vote on.
So Ross, what about the April 8th? I don't understand the April 8th date then.
All right, so each of these regulations are quite temporary the way that they're drafted now. If you guys would like, you can cast that date out further. But all of the extensions can be passed by resolution of the city commission. So if we put the extensions on the agenda for the regular meeting in June, we can continue to enforce that to whatever date the commission deems appropriate at that meeting. The idea is the June deadline is the furthest the commission could extend out those prohibitions without passing a new ordinance.
Gotcha. So April 8th, or can keep extending it till June. Gotcha.
Correct.
Okay.
So should we do the April date, or do we just say this is in effect until further notice, and then June 8th would be the sunset date? So then at any time the commission feels, or the health board and the commission feels we're out of this situation, then we can just pull it rather than having to approve it every.
Yeah, except I feel like, agreed, that'd be easier for us. I feel like in this instance, however, for planning purposes, for people, employers to be able to give people an estimated time where they may be able to come back to work and such, I think the timeframes are beneficial in that regard. So folks could reasonably expect, until April 8th for certain, we're not going to be open, but we may be opening up on the 9th. It's better for us not to have those, but I think for them, for their planning purposes, they could at least expect when the reconsiderations would occur and not be in limbo.
I'm a little confused. April 8th or April 14, I thought was where we had it in some of this.
Yeah. It's April 14th. It's June 8th or 9th, I believe.
Yeah, so it's April 14 though, right?
It's April 14, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
If you guys think that first date is going to be expiring a little too soon based on the current trajectory of the spread of this virus, you maybe want to pick a reasonable deadline of like maybe the second commission meeting in April to let April kind of run its course.
I don't, because I think you're right. I think you're right, Ross, but I think we should, give folks those employers and those businesses a time frame where then they can go to, they can know it's 2 more weeks or 2 more weeks as opposed to just arbitrary,
Yeah.
But that's my opinion.
But does it also have the opposite effect where you're creating this expectation that things will go back to normal on April 14th, and then they have to sit and wonder, should I be ready to go on April 14th? That creates uncertainty too, or at least I could see it creating uncertainty. If we are gonna put a date, I would be more comfortable with Ross's recommendation that we leave it till the second meeting in April, just because I think from what we're hearing, it's very unlikely this will be resolved by April 14th. And if it is, the commission could still pull it at that time, right, Ross? If we deem that we're out of the danger zone.
What did Huron and Rapid do, Ross?
They were the ones who came up with this concept.
No, what date did they do? Did they do forever? Did they, what did they?
A shorter time frame. I think. Hold on, I can tell you specifically what Rapid City did here because I got the draft of it on Saturday. Let's see, thanks. Give me a moment here.
Ex officios can give us guidance as well.
And Huron, it was until further notice, according to reporting the Argus Leader.
I was just reading that one, and it says until such time as amended or repealed.
Okay, yeah, that was a change then. Let's see.
But I'm not sure I have the latest version either.
So the language that we have in there says that date, and then it's very clear, though, that it can be that consideration will be given at that time for the potential for an extension or additional days of closure, right? So I wouldn't want to give it to any date beyond the second meeting in April. And at that point, I don't know what the problem would really be with the.
So Rapid Cities. I'm sorry, Dave. I got ahead of myself. Rapid City set April 8th as their date. I don't know if that's when they had a meeting scheduled, but that's what they had in the original draft. And I just adjusted that back to be the day after our first regularly scheduled commission meeting because that date made more sense.
I think they just did 2 weeks, So it was Wednesday, I think, effective, but.
Yeah. The story I read about Rapid City's vote, though, it was hotly contested for about 2 hours before they voted. There were many individuals from the public who got up and spoke on both sides of the issue.
Yeah, many people in the room to speak on either side of it, yeah.
But it did pass.
Yeah, I mean, there isn't. Our recommendations are that they do this. The time, it's open. Either date we choose, the time is open. We can extend it or we can lessen it. I just thought from a planning perspective for a business, if they can tell people, hey, check back with us in 2 weeks. As employers, that might be useful, but I'm sure they have ordering to consider and those types of things as well. And I don't know how much lead time they need to give to, when you're ordering for food for a business or your liquor or what have you, not in that. So I think we do need a date, but whether it's whether it's 14th or after the second meeting, but I just think it's good to have a date there. Which date I won't split hairs on because we're just making a recommendation. The commission will know we struggled with this and they can hash that out too.
I think it's also important to note that I think if the health board felt that the danger had passed, that we would recommend lifting this as soon as possible. But we're just being realistic in what we're hearing. This is going to last for a while.
Maybe you change it to the 28th, Ross. That's the second,
okay.
The Tuesday after our second meeting.
Okay.
I do like having a date in there, whether it's, the 28th or the 14th. I think important to at least set a target so businesses know when we're going to reevaluate. Publicly know when we're going to reevaluate it. You know, obviously we'll be evaluating this hour by hour as things move along, but I think for the public to know a date when they're sure we'll be, you know, having this discussion again is important.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and email this to everybody. Have we had a vote on this yet?
We had a motion. We did not have a second.
And is that the version, Ross, that I can put into the packet?
Yes.
I'll make a second, or I will second the motion.
Just point of clarification, Ross, where would golf courses and clubhouses stand here? That's a recreational facility, I presume.
That would be I would view that as a recreational facility.
I think you'd still be okay with owners doing maintenance on facilities and things like that. That wouldn't be impacted. It's just the operate.
So even the outdoor portions of a course would be included in the closure, or just the clubhouse activities? There's the kind of detail that we're going to get questions about.
This is the kind of stuff that's going to plague us in the next couple of weeks. I don't mind adding golf course maintenance to the list of exceptions.
Well, or, you know, to me, that's just like takeout. If they're doing their business in a way where you're not going to interact, I mean, if you're out single play, golfing, you know, I don't golf, but if you go out and hit 9 holes or whatever, you know, then on your own, that's okay. And I think archery, you can go out and shoot archery. You don't want to be, but the way I understand archery, you don't really want to be by someone else when you're shooting archery. So isn't that okay?
Yeah. For example, we had people playing frisbee golf in Memorial Park today, and that's something that we're permitting. So I think golfing, you know, conducted appropriately, where we're not, you know, the guidelines came out on smart play as far as golf etiquette is concerned. I think that the golfers will be in tune with that. So the green space of a golf course would be considered park area too, I think. I don't know.
Well, I can specifically, you guys are all in agreement. I don't have any problem adding golf courses to both the exceptions applying to closures, as well as the places that are exempted from communal gatherings too.
I would say the outdoor portion of golf courses, not the clubhouse gathering, though.
Fair. Okay. Okay.
We're going to have to, we'll be defining this as, because we're not, I mean, the commission's going to have to help us, but we'll be defining this for a lot of situations and interpreting it, I think.
Okay. Okay, I have added that exception, assuming the 3 voting members are on board with that. Mary, how do you feel about that?
Yep, it seems okay. I mean, I think if you're outside, it's very much like a park, right? And we've okayed parks, so I'm good with that. But not the golf club house, but certainly out on the greens. That's very park-like in my mind.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna email this over to you guys here.
So, should we just go ahead and vote?
I
Do
would,
you
say
think
that
there's
that's,
something?
I would say that that's where you're at right now. So if you want to just call out your name and vote.
Johnson, aye.
Milroy, aye.
Leon, I. We'll make that recommendation to the commission. Ross, if you'll get me the revised ordinance, I will get it to the commission tomorrow morning via the packet. That packet will be made public in the morning as well, so that folks can take a look at the language. And we will have a 12 o'clock city commission meeting, same style, so folks can participate either in the meeting room. You know, we're going to limit participation, how many people can be in the room at the time, not limit participation, but how many people. But you can also participate here on the live, YouTube live.
And Amy, can we get that front and center, like in our news feed on the website, so people can easily find it? And I'm sure we'll do some social media sharing as well.
Yeah, we'll put everything up first thing in the morning, and I'm not sure how it will work to share a document on Facebook or social media, but perhaps we can share a link to it as well.
Yeah, we'll link to the commission documents, which I think we'll have up as soon as we can.
Yeah, and you know, I'm not sure where we're at with the agenda, or if our agenda wizard is still up tonight, but I'm sure she'll put it together first thing in the morning, if not yet, if tonight.
The agenda has been posted.
Okay, so I'm waiting for that email from you, Ross, and then I'll forward it on to see if we can get it up, the packet up and going either, you know, either tonight or first thing in the morning.
Yeah, it's coming your way.
All right, so do we have any further business?
Oh, we do have a meeting scheduled for 4 o'clock on Wednesday. That was scheduled previously. Should we continue with that, or would we like to change that?
What's your opinion, Dr. Milroy?
Well, maybe it's not a bad idea to touch base after the commission meeting to be up to date on what they all said. Maybe I wouldn't have to be a long meeting.
Okay. I want to thank everyone for hanging in there with us as we swat through a lot of details, and it's been a long night for all of us. We started at 6 o'clock and it's almost 10. So good work, and I think a lot of people will be grateful that we're providing some guidance to the community, and we'll also be criticized for it too. So we'll be ready to answer questions and do the best we can.
Yep, thanks everyone.
Do we need a motion to adjourn? If so, I will make that motion.
I will second.
I'll second. Okay, Leo and I.
Johnson, aye.
Milroy, aye.
Awesome.
Good.
Thank you, everybody.
Hey, thanks everyone.
Good night.
Bye.